What's up, fight fans? Big Tone MMA back with Nolan Kings, aka MMA Kings, to discuss.
You did it again.
Did I do really?
I think you're doing this shit on purpose now.
I mean, I did it on Twitter on
There's
purpose.
only one of me. There's only one.
I did it on Twitter on purpose. Mr. Kings. Uh, we are back. ContenderCast, week 3. Another great show, top to bottom. Really delivered. There was quite a few. I feel like this one was really hit by the injury bug, more so than other ones, or just issues, I guess, replacement issues.
Yeah, it was. There was 3 pullouts, I think, in this, or actually 4. The main event. Uh, Antonina Shevchenko, her opponent pulled out. Silvana Gomez Juarez, or Juarez Gomez. Always confused which one was which, but yeah, she pulled out, and then Greg Rebello, of course, had a debacle with multiple opponents falling out. Oscar Ivan Kota fell out due to visa issues, and then Angel Deanda fell out for unknown reasons. I talked to him on Wednesday morning last week. He was making the drive out to Vegas later that day. He did all the stuff at the PI, got his photo shoot in. They actually showed a little clip of it on the broadcast tonight. They were talking, Rebello's 2 opponents fell out, and they showed Deanda doing his square off. So he was there. I know for a fact I saw a picture of him doing the photo shoot. Like, something weird must have happened there. It must have been either medicals didn't come through, something didn't work out right, or there was something going on there because literally I have no idea. He didn't get hurt. It wasn't an injury. Then the other one that was an injury was Andrew Todd Hunter, the jiu-jitsu specialist who was once in the UFC, kind of notable for a debacle with weight cutting in Mexico City that left him in a coma for a few days, and then got him subsequently released from the UFC. So he pulled out because he suffered a back injury, and then what I was told was he started to lose feeling in one of his arms that was due to like some type of nerve damage in his back or something. So he had to pull out. Jordan Williams stepped in for that one. Josh Parisian stepped in against Rebello, and then Jamie Nevera stepped in against Shevchenko. So snake bitten week, but I think it turned out in the end to have some good matchups, if not some better ones. As long as at least the men's fight. I think the men's fights, the Williams stepping in and Parisian stepping in, where it made the fights better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Williams really impressed. Completely, that was the fight that kicked off the night. Came in 5 days' notice. You did a great feature on him. Has type 1 diabetes. Can't cut weight due to that, so he has to walk around close to his fighting weight, obviously. Comes in, just completely dominates Tim Karen. Kind of like a attrition stoppage, I guess, or mercy stoppage from Herb Dean. There wasn't really like a big blow or anything. It wasn't like Tim Karen was, knocked out, or wasn't. It wasn't even like he wasn't really like stopped defending himself. I think it was just more attrition. Like Jordan Williams was just on the feet. He was beating him up on the ground. It was just constant ground and pound. And he seems to have quite the gas tank, because it looked like he could have just ground and pounded all night long.
Yeah, and a lot of referees I don't think would have made that stoppage at that time. I actually didn't have a problem with it. At first I was like, oh, what happened? Like, did he grab his glove? Did did he do something that made them call timeout? No, it was an actual stoppage. I actually really like this stoppage, and I don't think it's one that you see that often. What was your opinion on it? Did you think it was the right call?
Situationally, yes. I mean, we're talking about a Dana White's Contender Series fight. If this was for a UFC title, a UFC contender matchup, something much more crucial than this, then no. Like I probably would have a problem with it, but I don't. I think everything's relative, and I mean, Tim Karen's just getting butchered.
Yeah.
and there's very little chance of him coming back. The whole point of being on the show is to win a UFC contract, right? At the point that the fight was stopped, is there any chance that Tim Karen's getting a UFC contract?
And he didn't display that he was even able to defend himself. You know what I mean? It wasn't like earlier on in the fight he was defending the strikes. Now he was a little tired. He just kind of showed from the start to be seemingly incapable to even defend this type of stuff at his early on in the round at his best. So I didn't have a problem with it. I think there was there's certain, like you said, it's situational. There's certain situations that you get yourself in. There was one fight, I forget which one it was. It might have been in PFL or something recently where it was one of those standing stoppages, and the guy was complaining about it. But if you get dropped a bunch of times in a row and you're getting pummeled and you're like sneaking out of situations at the last second, or if you're just accumulating all these little rapid punches throughout a fight, like there's certain scenarios, in my opinion, where a stoppage where you're not rocked out of your mind or in serious trouble can be appropriate. And that's what we saw tonight. I thought that was a good call by Herb Dean.
Yeah, and definitely, the big story is that Jordan Williams, overcame tons of adversity. The fact that he's not allowed to he can't cut weight, and was dealing with the hamstring injury that he revealed after the fight was over smartly. Um, you know, I think he really got some fans off of tonight. He'll definitely be on more people's radars. He might even get another shot to be on the show. But ultimately it just wasn't a performance that screamed like UFC contracts. Uh, right.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows you how high the threshold is for these, the Contender Series, because we've had guys that have put on excellent performances. Like if you watch this on a card, like a regional show, an LFA, or even a UFC event, like that was a good performance by him. He went in there against a guy that he was, originally an underdog against, then ended up at even money against, and he went in there and he dominated him on 4 days' notice with a ruptured hamstring. And the same thing with Austin Springer from last week, like these, or 2 weeks ago. I don't even remember when that was. They're all kind of blended together. It was last week. Those two fighters, put on great performances, but it still wasn't enough for this type of setting. I think that's what the Contender Series is all about, that it just really, really heightens the bar of what you have to do to get a UFC contract.
Definitely. And next up, we had this was my pick for what I thought was going to be fight of the night, and the one I was most looking forward to was Julian Rosa and Jamal Emmers. What is that?
What's up?
Oh, I think it's just that was just noise.
Hearing voices, man.
I not yet, not yet. Arosa obviously probably best known for losing a very controversial decision to Paddy Pimblett over in Cage Warriors.
I thought Arosa won that fight.
I I think there's a lot of people who agree with you. Very controversial. Like I said, he was basically brought in, as a, hey, this guy fought, on Tough and the UFC. Watch Paddy beat him, basically, kind of thing. And if you go to MMA Decisions or talk to anybody, they'll probably tell you they thought Paddy Pimblett lost that fight. So that's probably what he's best known for. But of course, was on the Ultimate Fighter, lost to Artem Lobov, also, won the Ultimate Fighter. Was impressive enough to make it onto the Ultimate Fighter finale. That was season 22, and then lost to Ishihara, Teruto Ishihara, who just fought recently, and was subsequently cut by the UFC after that. So anyway, he's fighting Jamal Emmers. I was excited for for the Emmers side because I feel like he has some of the best, best striking we've seen, outside of the UFC. Trains at a great camp in Pinnacle out here in California, coming off the TKO, the great TKO win at LFA 36. That was also here in California, and recently beat Chris Avila, who used to be in the UFC, and Corey Sandhagen, who of course is in the UFC. So
And Alex Hernandez, the recently ranked Alex Hernandez, he also beat him way back in the day.
Okay, so we're going, so back in the day.
Yeah, that was pretty early on. But actually, those two, Emmers actually went to Fortis MMA, where Hernandez trains with some other LFA fighters, Ray Rodriguez, who's one of the top bantamweights in LFA. He got some work in there, so he's a tough guy, man. You know, like you said, in the California regional scene, he's been doing quite well for himself. This was a good fight. I think it was, definitely the most competitive fight. If there was a fight of the night award, I would probably give it to this fight. But it was good stuff. It was overall, what was your assessment of it? If you want to break it down a little bit more, let them know what exactly transpired in that fight.
I would agree with you. Yeah, if we had fight of the night, I think this would be it. Emmers really seemed to win the first. I mean, it started off with both guys trying to draw counters. It looked like, keeping their hands very low, waiting for the other guy to press forward and then counter strike off of that. And then, as the fight grew on, they kind of, started getting more aggressive. I thought Emmers landed some, nice punches in the first round and overall won it. There was a nice exchange where he landed a good right hand, and Arosa just, egged him on, basically, like, is that all you got? Give me more type of thing. And then round 2 kicked off, and it just turned into it went from kind of technical, counter striking to just pure brawling. They were just thrown for the fences, which was surprising to me. And both those guys survived those that big exchange, but then Arosa lands this head kick that went through the glove of Emmers and dropped him. And at first I thought it was early stoppage, because it was okay, he got dropped, but actually Arosa got dropped in the first round, right?
Yep, with a jab. Nice little jab by Emmers.
Yeah, stiff jab, drops him in the first round. So I see Emmers go down. I'm like, okay, he dropped him, but why are they're stopping the fight? This is crazy. He just got dropped. And then they show the replay, and it's okay, he was completely gone. As soon as that head kick landed, it went straight through the guard and into his temple, and he was done. So I had no problem with, after seeing the replay, I was like, okay, it's completely fine with the stoppage. I don't know what you thought of the stoppage, but
yeah, no, I thought it was good. And it's the second week in a row we've had a weird angle at the time that a knockout was occurring. The other one that was a little more obvious last week when we had that weird angle that the person was out. That was the Dwight Grant Tyler Hill fight. It was just at the point where the fighter that landed the punch's back was directly at the camera. So we just saw feet go up in the air, and you know what I mean? So
and the same thing happened, sorry not to cut you off, but the same thing happened when Arosa got dropped in the first round.
Yeah,
we had to watch.
I don't know, maybe it's it's weird because that doesn't usually happen. Usually we get at least a little bit of a side angle to see what's going on. But I agree with you. I thought that I definitely wanted to see the replay again, because I was just so shocked that Arosa hit him that hard. He was out cold. He was hurt. Emmers, he was out on the up on the stool, kind of a little groggy still for a couple minutes after the knockout. So just an impressive performance by Arosa. I feel like a lot of people have written him off, but you got to realize with this game, people get better, people improve. And, last fight, 2 fights ago, 3 fights ago, 10 fights ago, it might be a totally, completely different fighter than it is now. There's some prospects, man, that I just, especially with the Contender Series last year, that I'm just, at the time I was like, this person's green, they're underdeveloped, they're maybe a little bit, they haven't improved for a while. And then all of a sudden, they get to the UFC and they start cranking. They start having these opportunities where they get motivated again. They have something to fight for. And, maybe they're able to dedicate themselves more, either time-wise or going to a different gym. And you start seeing the results. And Arosa just, he had some difficulties in the fight where he got hurt and stuff. But, man, he put it on. He beat a guy that was A, like a 3-1 favorite against him, and B, a guy that's a legitimate fighter who you have to be pretty good to beat Jamal Emmers. So awesome showing by Julian Erosa. And, I think that we'll probably talk about the decision and what Dana did at the end, but I thought that what his plan was with Erosa was the right move.
We'll get to the White decision at the end.
Yeah. We don't need to rehash this.
And I don't think, just to end this, I don't think Jamal Emmers is going to be quitting MMA or anything.
No.
I'm sure he's probably, thinking about his next opponent already. He's that kind of guy. It's a tough one to bounce back for him, to be brutally honest. You got knocked out. I mean, it's not like you lost a decision. It's like you got knocked out pretty much, not cold, but pretty much. So it's tough. Like, it's not one of those situations where you can like really see him getting, an immediate call back to a Contender Series or even like a UFC shot. I feel like he has to go back to the regional scene and rack up another win or two before, it gets to that point.
I do want to just jump in here and say that I think that I agree with you. I think that that's probably what will happen. But we saw last year a few guys that got not preferential treatment, because the guys that were signed they were UFC level, but they weren't at a point in their career where they would normally get signed, if that makes sense. Like, they're, usually you have to have a few wins in a row, 3 wins in a row at minimum to get in the UFC. It seemed like they kind of, they threw that stipulation out the door. They signed Steven Peterson, who had lost on Contender Series pretty decisively to Benito Lopez. They signed him, even though he would only have 1 win in a row. They signed Matt Bissett, who was actually coming off a loss on the show. I don't know if there was anybody else that they signed that lost, but those are the 2 that come in my mind. So if Emmers goes back, he gets an impressive win for LFA against a legit opponent. Like, there's a chance they could call him for a short notice opportunity. They seem to really like the Contender Series guys, and Dana really likes Emmers. I don't know if you remember, Tony, but he was on Dana White's Looking for a Fight on one of the episodes. Fought Thiago Moises, and he actually lost the fight on the episode. And Dana was talking about how they went there to scout Moises. They didn't end up giving him the contract because they weren't impressed with his showing. They thought he was kind of being a little too flashy and on purpose and stuff like that. But you mentioned, like, even though Emmers lost, I'm really impressed by this kid. Like, we're going to keep an eye on him. We like the way he fights. So if that sentiment remains and they like what they saw here in Contender Series tonight, 1 or 2 wins, if that, could end up with end Emmers back in a UFC opportunity.
Yeah, and you have to remember too, the UFC is again increasing their amount of events next year, so a lot more opportunities.
Austin Arnett was another guy.
Austin Arnett.
I knew there was a third one. That's who it was.
So yeah, there'll be even more UFC events in 2019. So yeah, expect more opportunities. You could see it as a bar being lowered, whatever. But I'm sure we'll see. I hope and I'm sure we'll see Jamal Emmers get another shot. But on to the heavyweights. The only heavyweight fight on this card, Parisian and Greg Rebello. Rebello actually coming on for the second time. He was on the first season. He fought. God, I hate pronouncing this guy's name. Azuna Anyanwu. I was close.
Yeah.
Okay.
Close.
So he was a favorite then, wound up actually losing that fight by TKO, went back to CES. I think you actually went to one of the shows he was at.
Yeah. I went to the two fights that he's had since Contender Series. He headlined for CES. The last one he won their vacant heavyweight title. So yeah, man, it's funny. He brings the crowds. Or he brought the crowds to, spoiler alert, he brought the crowds to Twin River Casino. And, he just, on the regional scene, it's hard pressed. You're hard pressed to find a heavyweight on the regional scene that can pile up consistent wins for a major regional promotion. And he would do that. He just can, in the big situations, he struggled. On the Contender Series, he struggled. On Tough, he struggled. But whenever he got to the big fights whenever he had the big fights on the regional scene, he'd always win. So this was a do or die moment for him entering this fight. He told me before the fight that this would be it for him if he lost. He's 36 now, and not many people get 3 shots at the UFC contract through these, UFC shows like The Ultimate Fighter and Contender Series. He's an exception to that rule, and he knew that if he lost tonight that this was probably going to be it, and that, coaching would be a more valuable thing to continue doing than fighting. And unfortunately, man, if you want to break it down, give the big breakdown, we'll be good to get into my additional thoughts and feelings.
That sounds way too similar to another podcast.
Yeah.
Honest. Someone who recently got murdered on Twitter by a boxing promoter, but we won't.
Yeah.
Josh, on the other side of the cage was Josh Parisian, who, unless you are DC Howard, I guess. I mean, there's no way you know who this guy was, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of prospects. And I actually, the guy that he fought a few weeks ago at LFA, I knew the fight was happening, but I only knew his opponent, who was like 4-4. I didn't even remember like Parisian. Like I ended up missing that fight. I think I tuned in late to LFA, and that was the first fight of the night. But yeah, man, I feel like I have a good handle on the regional scenes in the U.S. especially, and there aren't a whole lot of heavyweights on the regional scene. So this guy was a little bit of a random, left field pick by the UFC last second. 6-2, decent record, not outstanding, not bad. 4 days notice comes in as Rebello's third opponent and steps in there and starts throwing some funky stuff.
Yeah, 4 days, and the reason I said unless you're DC Howard is because he's a huge Tony Lopez fan, and apparently Tony Lopez was at this event too. Side note, but he had fought Tony Lopez in King of the Cage, so that's why I'm thinking DC Howard probably knew who he was. Into the fight, though, I mean, these guys, heavyweights, played out like a heavyweight fight, and I mean, it didn't really last very long. Parisian threw a spinning back fist that it was another one of those weird angle things, wasn't it? Where we were like, did he really just throw a spinning back fist? And then
I think they switched angles on that one, like right when he spun. So, our brains just like had no clue what was going on.
And I was like, I don't know if it was a spinning back fist that got him, or like if he followed it up with something else. But it was totally the spinning back fist. Like there's this guy who cuts from 300 fucking pounds to get down to the 265 limit, and he's throwing spinning shit. Like what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought, like, I didn't do as much tape study on him as I would have liked to. I was up in Maine for the weekend, and I just was able to watch his most recent fight at LFA, and it was a little bit different of a fight, so I completely wasn't expecting that. I don't know if his other fights had shown him throwing that many spinning techniques, but for a big guy, I know it's not like the prettiest thing in the world, but for a big guy that has to cut to a heavyweight who's 6'4", just an absolute behemoth of a man, to be able to throw things like that, like, that's a pretty rare, it's a rare thing that you would see on the regional scene at heavyweight. So I'm almost curious if it just the whole just idea of, Rebello's fought a lot of guys. I don't know how many guys he's seen that has thrown that kind of attack at him. I wonder if it almost caught him off guard a little bit because Parisian was throwing spinning shit, and he was throwing it often. His spinning back fist, he threw one at the beginning that I thought hurt Rebello. Like, you could just kind of tell he was a little stunned when they went into like the clinch. And then I don't know if you noticed this, Tony, but he did a really good job setting this second one up. He threw a spinning back kick to the stomach that landed pretty solidly on Rebello. Rebello kind of gave a little, his forearm was down. And then within 30 seconds, he threw the spinning back fist. And I think Rebello thought there was going to be a kick again, kind of had his guard down, and it just, it was a one-punch knockout, really. There was some follow-up shots, but Rebello was hurt with the spinning back fist, and that was all she wrote, really. There was no helping Greg, no saving Greg from that one.
Oh, that was a better breakdown than mine. Damn. No, I totally didn't even pick up the spinning back kick that set that up. Even more credit to Parisian, for having that kind of game plan coming into this on such short notice. And yeah, you're totally right. Like I really don't think, spinning back fists or something heavyweights are accustomed to defending or preparing for.
Right.
So
If he was Alex Nicholson or somebody that's like a really athletic heavyweight, that would be one thing. But this guy's, he honestly kind of reminded me of like, and I don't know if it was just because, Ben Rothwell was who he's kind of reminded me of, just like his personality, his interview afterwards, and then also like
a little bit less hairy.
Just kind of like Rothwell used to do that funky like head bob thing, and he kind of get wild and crazy and throw something weird. Like that's kind of what I thought of this guy, like the whole fight. I guess it's kind of a stretch of a comparison, but it was just, I don't know. I think that was quite the performance, and people will remember who he is from this fight.
Yeah, they also both don't look athletic whatsoever.
Yeah, the body type, just a massive guy.
Yeah, definitely. I think Ben is a little bit more hairy, but
sure. Did you catch his interview, by the way?
Oh yeah, it was hilarious.
Oh, he's so funny. Like, I don't know. I feel like the personality could be even good, pretty good too. The interview right after the fight, and then the one at the end of the episode, like they both were. He wasn't afraid to just kind of be who he was and not care what people thought about him. So that would be a nice potential addition down the line for the UFC.
Yeah, and so that was the heavyweight fight. Didn't last long. Speaking of fights, that didn't last.
One more thing about the heavyweights. After the fight, Greg Rebello announcing his retirement on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
Something we should bring up. He stayed true to his word that he told me, and good for him. Not a lot of people can compete for 15 years at a high level like that. I mean, 2010, I believe, was when he got the invitation to try out for Tough to fight to get in the house. And then now here we are in 2018, and he was, back in that same gym on the cusp. So good for him. He had a good career. He's, may not be renowned in the whole United States, but at least here in New England, he's, one of the most you go to some of the local shows and he's there and he knows everyone. Like everybody knows him, respects him, has trained with him. So mad props to him. These are the guys that never get credit, and they really help build the sport. You know what I mean? He was fighting before they had cages were legalized here. He was fighting before knees and elbows were legal here. So it takes an army, and he's one of the pieces of the early days here, at least in my region.
Yeah, 33 fights. Kind of knew, this was the end of the line. 2 losses on Contender Series, and good for him. That he kind of realized it's time to move on. And credit to him on his great career that he had. The UFC isn't the end all be all, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure it would have been great for him to get on, finally get that contract. But I mean, he really doesn't need it to. He doesn't need it to, make him what he is. It's not, a complete verification of your of your whole career.
Right. And he's going to have a nice gig, like I said, coaching afterwards. He's got a lot of up and coming guys. Like, he this past January he cornered his first time cornering in the UFC. He's been Calvin Cater's striking coach for a while. That's one of his students. So we're going to see more of him in the future. He's got a ton of guys at CES. So I'm sure this might be the end of his career as a fighter, but as a coach, it's like the kickoff is tomorrow. So good for him. Good for him.
And I mean, you totally ruined my great transition. We'll just get into the next fight. It didn't last long. T. Edwards, Austin, Tweedy. T. Edwards with I would imagine this was the highlight of the night. Just insane one-punch power, walk-off KO. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, the guy was just incredibly impressive. And we'll get to the UFC contracts at the end, but I think you can guess, who got it. I don't know if you have any more on him. I think you did. You talked to one of these guys.
Yeah, I talked to both of them. I've talked to T a few times in the past. I think I've done 3 interviews with him, and I did this one with Tweedy. And Man, this was the matchup in the Contender Series out of the first 3 episodes that I thought was the most fair matchup, like between 2 legitimate talents. Like we had some fights. Excuse me.
I think the odds matched up with what you're saying too.
Yeah, big time. You know, there's been guys on the Contender Series who had close fights who were maybe a little less developed. Like they were the stars of tomorrow. Like Montel Jackson, Rico Desculo on paper was a solid fight. Like the Tim Karen, Jordan Williams on paper was a solid fight. Not in actuality, but this fight, man, either of these guys could have been in the UFC like in 2 fights ago. I know Edwards didn't have a ton of fights coming into this one, but every single fight he would improve leaps and bounds. He's a ASU wrestler, high-level wrestler. He had 5 knockouts out of 5 wins coming into this fight. Made it 6. Quick knockout, 28 seconds of Austin Tweedy, who was 10-1. Just dominant on the regional scene. His only loss, he actually lost by split decision or unanimous decision. I don't remember which, but he had an in-cage asthma attack during that fight. So just like they're both really good talents. Tweedy was actually offered a UFC contract earlier this year to fight Stevie Ray on short notice in London. Didn't have a passport, and Edwards is training at the MMA lab. So there's just a lot of stuff that was coming into this one that I was like, man, this is going to be one of those fights. It's going to be like a chess match. It's going to be potential for a fight of the night. And it ended like in an instant. I was shocked. I screamed. I gave out one of my like startled MMA yells and got told to be quiet. So you knew it was a good fight when that happens, and just impressive stuff from T. Edwards. I think the sky's the limit for him. The MMA lab is just taking over with these prospects, man. We've seen Sean O'Malley on Contender Series last year, Kyler Phillips, Dan Morat just signed to the UFC. They have a whole squad of people that are coming in, and they're just a great team, really underrated team in my opinion.
Oh yeah, love the MMA lab, John Crouch. Great team over there. I thought this was weird because I think at some point I must have seen him fight because he was one of those guys who got picked up as a undercard on a Bellator event. How those situations go.
Yeah.
Throw guys on it. I think it was actually like a post slam, so maybe I didn't even see the fight, but I was in the same building as him at one point back in 2016.
Humble brag.
Yeah, no, I just thought it's weird, when you go to a lot of and you realize there's people you might have seen or you at least were at an event that they fought at.
Yeah.
But man, super impressive. Like I was, you hyped it up. I honestly, I was like, it's not going to be as good as Emmers and Arosa. And I mean, T. Edwards just, wow. Like athleticism is obviously there. Punching power. He's got the wrestling, to lean back on. It's obviously a division that's insanely deep. So he's kind of got that going against him. But man, the guy's really got some, if we're ranking the most impressive guys on the season so far, he's definitely pretty far up there.
Sure. I couldn't agree more, man. I think I always talk about it and people probably get sick of hearing me say it, but I think there's 2 things with the Contender Series you look at. One of them is potential. One of them is their established abilities at the moment. I think both of them are important factors in these fights. Like we see, I'll compare 2 from last season. Kurt Hollabaugh, I think, was the most established fighter in that season. Like he got in there and you were like, damn, this guy's ready to be in the UFC. Like he could have been in, he should have been in. He should have been in a couple fights ago. And then you look at a guy like Sean O'Malley and you're like, wow, he presents a lot of good stuff. Like with a few more fights, like he could be really somebody the UFC could push and could give good fights to and stuff like that. So I try to find like the perfect combination of those. That would be like my ideal prospect, somebody that's established, ready to take it to that level in the UFC where they can test themselves, but also has a high potential, potential ceiling, whatever you want to call it. And I think T. Edwards is that perfect, like one of the fighters on this season that has that perfect combination. He's still relatively fresh in the sport, and he's just, if you forget about this fight, like if you're consistently knocking out matchups that aren't squash, consistently knocking out fighters that aren't squash matchups for you as an Arizona State wrestler, like that's somebody that the UFC should be all on board with. And I cannot wait. I think a lot of people can't wait. A lot of people know who he is now. And I think that his next fight in the UFC, I'm super excited to see who they give him. I don't know if he's hurt at all, if he's injured, if he broke his hand or anything, but hopefully we can see him come into the UFC, make his UFC debut by the end of the year. That would be nice.
Yeah, totally. T. Edwards also has, that whatever you want to call it, personality, swagger, persona, with the little the contract signing celebration he did afterwards, and then his post-fight interviews are pretty good. So,
and it's so not scripted. He did it. He's just like kind of an interesting guy. You know what I mean? Like some people try really hard, I feel like, and he's just kind of that's who he is. Something to be said about that in today's MMA.
Yeah, we have to talk about it. It's kind of important. It's just one of those things. Yeah, unless you have a big name, like a Shevchenko name, then you don't need all that personality. Because Antonina took on Jamie, the much misspelled Jamie Navarro.
I think every way that I spelt it, I ended up deleting my tweet and respelling it a different way. And then 2 minutes later, I'd find out that was wrong. I don't know what's going on there, man. We got to get some clarification from her about her. And it wasn't like it was, her first name. It was her first name and her last name. So they were spelt multiple ways. So
it's not even a Brazilian. She's not even Brazilian.
Yeah.
They have these weird nicknames and all this other stuff. But it's
I don't know. We'll see. I guess maybe sometime down the road, if I interview her, I'll get to ask her. But man, how tough is she? She, has something to be said about that type of resilience that you show in that fight. I don't want us to overstep you in describing this fight, but it was a pretty one-sided beatdown.
Yeah, and I knew that the beatdown was definitely in play, but I also knew this chick was super tough. I knew that coming in. I had seen her fight, at LFA. I think I saw her fight. Where was it? Bellator, as well. She trains out of Dragon. Yeah, Bellator, at their last San Diego card, or one of the San Diego cards, because she trains out of Dragon House MMA, which is Bay Area, very well respected gym. I knew she was tough, but you're going against somebody who's basically, world-class Muay Thai fighter in Shevchenko. And it's an uphill battle. I think Navarro really needed to get the fight to the ground. The only time she was ever able to do that was with 20 seconds left in the first round. And this was after just getting bloodied up. We really saw Antonina utilize the Muay Thai plum clinch, which I mentioned a few times on Twitter. It's just something that you don't see a lot in UFC or higher level MMA, I guess. And I thought that was really cool. Someone, who's a big Muay Thai guy.
It's going to be like the ultimate nerd comparison, but it reminds me of the UFC video games. When I first started getting into it and I didn't really know how to play, and somebody would use the clinch and I would have no idea how to get out. And it would just, the whole fight would just be me getting kneed in the head. Man, her grip must be crazy tight. This isn't me in there fighting or me playing a video game. This is a person that trains every day of their life to get out of situations like this. And, you still can't do it. So big difference between, Shevchenko's performance and Chikadze's of last week, of these, crossover athletes coming into MMA. So there's something to be said about somebody who's really good at Muay Thai, and then also can cross that over to the mixed martial arts world.
Yeah, well, the thing with Muay Thai is the clinch is such an integral part. And I'll kind of nerd out a little bit more of the technical aspects, I guess. But and by no means am I a Muay Thai, expert. God knows, I'm terrible. You don't want to. If you if you set up a video camera and had me like hit a bag, it would just be ugly as hell.
Damn. So the instructional video is getting pushed off till next year.
Yeah, no, you won't be seeing that from me. But basically, I mean, you're gripping behind the head and then pulling down, um, and that's what sure, like you said, the grip was extremely strong, and so you're pulling down the head and it's not allowing any movement, and then just the knees. I mean, were vicious. She obviously, this is clearly somebody who's had quite a few shit.
Yeah.
It's getting late now. I can't even say.
Late. It's 12:30 here.
Clearly, somebody's had quite a few Muay Thai fights, and you know it is very well disciplined in the martial art. I mean, one of those knees just opened up Jamie. She's bleeding all over the place. I think Herb had to step in and get the doctor in there, check her out. Said she was good. You know, I didn't have a problem with that because like we both said, very tough chick. You know, she needed the takedown. I thought, you know, hey, if she survives this and, you know, gets the second round, gets the takedown, there's a chance. That's not what wound up happening. You know, it just kind of got worse, just more knees. I made a joke, you know, forget Brian T City. It's Antonina Knee City Shevchenko.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Like
but yeah, man, you know, now that we can, we've gone through all the fights and we've talked about each match, like what actually transpired. I guess we can just go right into the decisions because, you know, Shevchenko, when she won that fight, I knew she was getting a contract. Like that was a tough week, but there's no way that the UFC is going to pass on her. There were 3 people coming into this season that I really felt like all they needed to do was win and the UFC would be all on board. One was Greg Hardy, one was Nick Newell, and the other one, Shevchenko. I just feel like those are the 3 like big names that they really wanted to get out of this, that they could make into stars like almost right off the bat. So I just, her winning decisively was enough to get her a contract no matter what she did.
So do you think, because this was, I wouldn't say a big issue on you know, not a huge talking point, but I mean, some had thought, you know, hey, if Shevchenko doesn't get the finish, she's not going to get a contract. And I was thinking, I mean, even if if she wins like a lopsided decision, I still think she's getting a contract. Do you think, and we brought up Jamie's toughness, if you thought, and honestly, I mean, Herb Dean could have let that go on. It's not like Jamie ever got knocked out or, you know, not that it would have been the right decision, you know. I'm not saying that it was a bad.
Wow, you're up for blood tonight.
No, like definitely Herb Dean or whoever, was it Herb Dean that was in for that one?
Yep.
He definitely made the right decision. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's other refs, you know, because Navarra never, you know, got knocked out. You know, the doctor never called it off.
Yeah, it was another mercy stoppage.
Yeah, it could have gone on, is all I'm saying. And then if it gets to the point where you have this one-sided beatdown, you know, 30-25, whatever, 30-26 decision, you know, is Shevchenko still getting that UFC contract?
Yeah, for me, you know, I would say that if she had a decisive decision victory, unanimous decision, 30-27, I would say that no matter what had happened tonight, she would have won if she had won by unanimous decision. I think if it was like a split or something, it would have had to have been like a barn burner. You know, I think the Benito Lopez, Steven Peterson, I think the better example is Brandon Davis, Austin Arnett from last year. Like, that was a close fight, close decision, but it was exciting enough that Dana was like, I need to give this guy a contract because that was an awesome fight. So I think Shevchenko gets the extra added bonus in getting a finish. Like if she had gone out there, say, and like, you know, it wasn't as much of a clinic as she put on tonight. It was just kind of, you know, say she landed on top of her and got a ground and pound win. Like, I think she still would have got the contract no matter what. That's where the leeway comes in. Like, if it was Jordan Williams that fell on top of Tim Karen and got the ground and pound win, like, I don't think he would have got the contract. But I think, you know, any type of unanimous decision would have got her a win. Any type of exciting decision would have gotten her a win. And any type of decisive stoppage would have gotten her a win. So win, 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 win.
Win-win. You been listening to J-Rock recently?
Yeah, that's why. Big
I,
J Rock guy.
I don't know if anyone got that reference that listens to this podcast, but anyway, so
You did. That's all that matters.
Shevchenko, gets the contract. We and you basically already spoiled it. T. Edwards got a contract.
Yeah.
I and the way this was different than the last 2 weeks, right? When they went back and Dana comes back out with his list ready or whatever. Before he gets to the winners of the contract, he says, Julian Rosa, really impressed. I think actually, did he start off with Parisian?
He started off. He went Arosa.
So he praised Arosa's performance. He's like, it was like Arosa really impressed.
Yeah.
Definitely a guy that we're going to be keeping an eye on. If we ever need a late replacement, a fill-in, he's going to be someone we're going to be calling. So basically saying, you're going to be seeing this guy soon. We're just not giving him the UFC contract tonight.
And I don't know if we've heard him say that before. I actually kind of like that. That we don't just get the Chris. Imagine if we had an explanation of what they were going to do with Chris Curtis. Like that would have changed the game. If they were like, oh, we're not going to give Curtis a contract, but he's going to be first on our list to call. Like he wouldn't have retired. We would have had some peace of mind of what's going on. So I like that Dana did this. I hope he kind of continues to do it with some of the impressive performances that don't get contracts.
Do you think that was because of some of the backlash?
I don't know. That's a good question because he kind of – I don't know if he didn't mention Springer last week, but –
I mean week one, because week one it was like, really? Like you're only going to give out, this, and then the next week it's like, oh, everybody gets a contract.
Right.
And now it's like, well, let's make clear with these other guys that they're going to be on call or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing that made me think that it was a backlash issue, at least that they were facing a backlash issue from the Chris Curtis thing, was the fact that Dana was supposed to go on Instagram Live and discuss with the fans who he was going to take.
Oh yeah.
So that to me, like when he did that, I was like, like maybe this is his way of like trying to make it more of a popularity contest type decision,
or at least let the fans have a voice of some kind.
Right. Exactly. So I don't know. I think that the explanations are something that we need. Like even if he were to take every winner on that card and just talk about them, like he could throw things out there when necessary, like I don't want him to just start blatantly like or randomly throwing out compliments, like things that are never going to happen, like, oh yeah, we're gonna this guy won and it was a solid decision, and we'll look at him down the line. I don't mean that. Like make it decisive, like he did tonight. Like Julian Erosa, like if we need a short notice replacement, he's at the top of our list. Like the chances of Julian Erosa's next fight being in the UFC, in my opinion, are close to 100%. Like I don't think he's going to take a fight elsewhere. Like there's no reason for him to. He's got, Dana literally went on national television and said that he's probably going to be filling in somewhere. So I like that, and we're going to segue into the next person that he talked about was Josh Parisian. Like it's kind of cool to be able to, if he were to just analyze each person's fight and give an honest assessment of what, A, if the UFC is going to do anything with them, B, if they get a contract, or C, if, they're just going to maybe meet up sometime in the future, but he wasn't ultra impressed.
Yeah, with Josh Parisian, it was apparently the next season of Tough, the fighters have already been decided upon. That's what I got from what he was saying.
Yeah.
And so
my guess is they're probably in the process of it right now, because I haven't heard anything about – usually there's this like awkward like period of time where the fighters went and tried out and they start to hear back, and then they're not supposed to say anything about what went on, not supposed to do interviews. I don't think we've reached that yet. So although there were a few heavyweights, and I don't know how this works. I think it's kind of like almost like if you tried out for like when I played basketball in high school, like, you go and some people are told right away that they're not going to make the team. And then as time goes on, like they make like different cuts, like as the weeks go by. So I think that's kind of the way they do it. So my guess is that they're in the decision-making process, but they're not they haven't come out with everybody yet. So, because I've seen a couple guys that tried out, that took fights, tried out for Tough, that have taken fights in the future, which means they probably didn't make it.
I feel like you buried the biggest statement that you were tall enough to play basketball.
Yeah, I was the center when I was in sixth grade. I was this height, and then
So you just never.
by the time that I got to high school, I was the point guard because I didn't grow anymore and everybody else grew. So
I just had to, because me and Nolan, if the listeners don't know, have met in person. So I know we're like the same. I think we're like the same height, right? Or you're like,
probably
you think
I'm 5'11" on a good day, 5'10" every other day.
you're like a couple inches taller than me. So yeah, I was just giving you a hard time
Yeah.
about that. But Josh Parisian, at least from what Dana said, was going set to be an alternate on this next season of Tough, which
Yeah.
people don't know is set to feature heavyweights and women featherweights, and it's quite possibly, or is the last season of Tough. So, he goes from being an alternate apparently, even though things weren't already decided. That's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
To definitely being on the show,
Mm.
and at least being, one of the more well-known guys, at least from right now that we know of, that made it on there. He's kind of got this to build off of. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he is the guy who has to cut to make.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm assuming. Usually, he hit the 265 mark on the nose. So unless he's got his weight down like perfectly, or he went to the, one of the casino buffets out in Vegas before the weigh-ins, I think that he's a guy that I would say has to cut it, some way. He's a massive guy, 6'4", and he's, not small in that frame. So yeah, he's got to cut. And
I think they mentioned on the broadcast that he's a guy who has to cut.
Yeah, and
I picked
thing
up
that I think we missed talking about was, I guess we didn't really miss it, but you said he went from being an alternate to being a a definite for Tough. But I think the thing that's killer is the fact that in between then he went from being an alternate to a Contender Series person to a Tough competitor. Like you could just tell when Dana read that off, like his expression was not.
Yeah.
He was just like, I don't know what the opposite of like a sigh of relief is. It was just like a sigh of terror, like fuck, man, I have to go through this, and like
it's such a big trade-off for them, because on one hand you are getting, I mean, and I will argue this, that they do get more exposure.
Sure.
Tough seasons, but it just does not sound fun at all. Like you have to, like you're shut down from social media. I don't even think you're like allowed to tell your friends and family about the results.
Right. I mean, my understanding is they tell you not to spread the word. I think like it's kind of one of those the UFC understands that like direct family members, people that are directly involved in your camp, like your coaches, if your wife is the one that manages your nutrition, like you can tell her, like, you know what I mean? So like really close family, and then also your people that are involved in your camp are the ones that can be told.
But basically this shit can't leak.
Right. They've honestly done a pretty good job of that over time. Like, I don't know if they send these guys like death threats or something, but most, like,
they sent Josh
the times that things have leaked, it's actually been from like television, like the channel guide, like accidentally dropping it, or like
Josh Gross.
What was it?
Josh Gross.
Yeah, that way back in the day, and then some, errant Twitter posts, things like that. So I don't know. They've done a good job, but it just must be a pain in the ass. A lot of the fighters that I talk to, I can't speak for heavyweights because the weight cutting thing probably won't be as big of an issue for some guys.
That was my thing, was like, okay, I didn't understand why he was so upset, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, you're not getting the UFC contract. That definitely sucks, right? But you're going to go in Tough, and, even if you don't win Tough, those guys get picked up all the time anyway. You're definitely going to make the finale. Like now it's like the finales are just full of, they put like 2 UFC fighters on there, and the rest are guys from the show.
Yeah.
So it's like you have at least one, guaranteed UFC fight. And then I realized, oh, this is the guy that they said cuts to 265.
Yeah.
Like he's going to have to, especially if he goes far on the show, he's going to have to cut down to 265 multiple times.
Yeah.
And as a heavyweight and just a a massive guy like that, I can't imagine. I imagine that's where a lot of his frustration came from. Like, oh my God, I'm really gonna have to do this.
Yeah, that's brutal, man. I just the other thing I think that goes into it. I was talking to a manager and a fighter who won Contender Series last year, and they were talking about how they were so glad that they got on Contender Series versus Tough. Like, just the fact that it's not a real, what the manager says is not a real fight situation. Like, nothing about it is real. You're fighting. Oftentimes, most of the fights are 2 rounds. You're not with your camp that knows you. You don't have game planning like you would at home. You have weight cutting all in this short period of time. You have, all this, the mental buildup of just being away from everything and being on like a desert island. Like, you're sometimes fighting people that you trained with for weeks on end. There's just the discrepancies between Tough and the real world are very distracting to a lot of fighters and interfere with their abilities to fight. So, that's kind of been I feel like an issue that hasn't necessarily been addressed with Tough. Like, everybody talks about the ratings and is it boring? Is it reality television? Are we past this? Things like that. But they don't talk about the fact that it's wearing on a lot of these fighters too when there's things like Contender Series, which is like, you don't fight 4 times for your chance to get a UFC contract. You fight once.
In a 3-round fight, yeah.
In a 3-round fight that you trained at your house with your camp, with your opponent in mind, with a safe weight cut, with safe medical, where, you're getting medically evaluated in depth after the fights, where, it's going on your pro record. Like, there's just so much stuff.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good, spot to kind of end off. Jordan Williams, the one guy that wasn't mentioned by Dana White at all, but this was a pro fight. It goes on his record. He climbs to 8-2.
Yes,
8-2. And it's not like Tough where this is an exhibition fight, right? Like, his record actually moves into, he has a real win against a real tough guy. Tough as in tough, not tough as in Ultimate Fighter. On Dana White's Contender Series, which, I mean, that's a building block right there. For a guy who has 10 only 10 fights, but really that's not that many in the world of MMA. So you take that, parlay that into, a fight, another, Bellator prelim fight, LFA, wherever, something like that. There's definitely upside there. Like, he doesn't have to, hang out in this house with a bunch of other fighters and wait for the next guy that he'll fight 2 rounds versus, and it's completely different.
Sure.
We're saying
100%.
And I think a better situation for him, probably personally. So, I mean, that was the whole card. I know you wanted to talk about there's actually, in case anyone doesn't know, there's no next Tuesday there is no Tuesday Night Contender Series. So 2 weeks from now, Contender Series returns, and Nolan wanted to talk about that real quick.
Yeah, just give like a 90-second breakdown of the fights. I think, like Tony said, next Tuesday there is no Contender Series for the 4th of July. They were originally planning a dark week. Not really sure what's going on with that, because I'd seen some places that week wasn't going to happen anymore, that they had some type of plans for it, but that they fell out. And then I also, one of the more recent UFC broadcasts, when they were advertising the series, they referenced it as still happening. So I have no idea what's happening with that July 2nd show or whatever it is, July 3rd show. No idea. I don't know if 4th of July got in the way of it or what, but July 10th, the Contender Series will be back for week 4, 5 more matchups. We found out about an injury replacement, or I checked in with Rafael Fiziev's camp tonight after the show, and he was pulled from the fight. They said that it wasn't due to – I asked if it was a visa issue, because there's been some problems with Contender Series guys from international countries coming in. So they said it wasn't that, and that he's been told that for now he's going to be postponed. Don't know what that means. I don't know if it's going to show up on a later Contender Series in the UFC or what. But stepping in his place against undefeated Joey Gomez is Kevin Aguilar, the LFA featherweight champion. He'll be moving up to 155 pounds. Super, super excited for this one. I think Gomez has flown completely under the radar. Like I said, 7-0, pretty good fighter. Kevin Aguilar, on the other hand, I think is a guy that even the casual fans have started to rally around him a little bit. High action fighter coming off a huge win against Tan Lee, brutal knockout. If you haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube. That's a great matchup. Co-main event, Bevon Lewis from last season's Contender Series was also featured on a recent LFA card. He's going to fight Alton Cunningham, another LFA middleweight. That's a very legitimate test for him. I think it's by far the toughest guy that he's fought. I'd actually kind of favor Cunningham if I was going to throw down some odds. So that's a legitimate test for a guy that the UFC invested a lot of money into, apparently, to do this, whatever they call it, the training program or the developmental program. So
developmental program.
The developmental program. So that's good stuff. The third fight of the night is Toby Misic, a guy that I didn't know a whole lot about before his name was announced on the show, but he's got a good resume from Hawaii, high action fighter. So he's going to be taking on Ricky Palacios from Combate Americas, who's another high action fighter. That's going to be at 145 pounds. And the only flyweight fight of the in the men's divisions for this entire American version of the Contender Series, Jordan Espinosa will be back for his second stint in Contender Series. He won last year on the show against Nick Urso, coming back trying to get that contract that he couldn't get last year against Riley Dutro, who's another Hawaiian who's been tearing it up in Asia on the in the Asian regional MMA scene. So that's a high action flyweight fight, the only one of this season. And then kicking off the card next week will be Max Mustaki from Island Fights, a high action fighter who isn't afraid to bite down on his mouthpiece and trade, against Jalen Turner, who's guy that trains at the RVCA Center out in California. Splits camp actually a lot of different places. 23 years old. He's a 6'3" lightweight, so he's a really tall guy. Another guy that's kind of a high-action fighter. So I think next week may not have some of the name recognition on the first few fights that we're used to, but it has a lot of exciting matchups. I think that the matchmaking itself is very fair, too. We won't see these huge gaps in the odds. So that's going to be good, man, and that's kind of my 90-second to 2-minute breakdown, and we'll be adding this to the podcast from now on for those that are interested.
That's very cool. Yeah, I didn't know Ricky Palacios was getting on here. Combate Americas. I mean, he was with them since probably the very beginning, and he was even featured on kind of their reality show that they did. A lot of fights in Combate. He might even have the most fights, hold the record for most fights in Combate. I don't know, but guys fought over there a lot.
You say you have a good sense, Tony, because you said he's been there since the beginning. He actually fought on their first event in 2013.
So yeah, like lifer Combate Americas fighter. It's cool to see these guys get a shot. Like you said, very high action fighters. So now I'm psyched. You got me psyched. I hope you listeners are psyched to watch that in a couple weeks. And
we get the 2-week build up too.
Yeah,
make it give us a little bit a whole extra week to get built up and excited.
Not that there's anything going on in the MMA world during that week. So
no.
Nothing big. Nothing big at all.
Nope, nothing.
But we'll talk to you guys in a couple weeks. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, guys.